Um, Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to the fourth industry series session on data analytics in private equity by Mr. Apurva Pandey. So now for a brief introduction of women in big data.
Good evening, everyone. We welcome you all. Before starting, we would like to introduce you to WIBD's mission and history. So, WIBD, or Women in Big Data, is a global volunteer driven organization whose mission is to cultivate tangible opportunities for women, unlock latent potential through accessible training, act as a catalyst for advancement with thought leadership, promotion, and empower equity allies of any gender with inclusive mentorship. What we're trying to envision is a future in which gender and resources don't limit equitable participation in big data influenced careers. Some of our global sponsors are Intel, SAP, AWS, NVIDIA, Microsoft, to just name a few. So we would also like to introduce you all to our India chapter leads. We have Dr. Ekta Mehul, who is the director and CEO of Orena Solutions Private Limited. She's a technopreneur and educationist. She has had a career of 25 years, divided equally in industry and academia. She has been awarded as the Women Entrepreneur of Gujarat and been invited by the states for representing India as in Women in Technology. And today we also have with us Soumya Moni ma'am. We welcome you, ma'am, who is the director of Incher Technologies Private Limited. She's a data enthusiast who's had a career of 22 years with experience in technology marketing and expertise in go-to-market strategy, product, services, solutions, to just name a few things, right? So she is an official member of Forbes Communication Council and National Marketing Council member as well. She received the most influential global marketing leader recognition from World Marketing Congress. I would also like to introduce our WIBD India Executive Council team. We have Mr. Piyush Sharma, who is Executive in Residence at UCLA and Stanford Seed Consultant. He is a global CEO coach and a C-Suite Plus startup advisor. We also have Dr. Abhilasha Vyas, who is currently serving as Executive Council member for WIBD India chapter. She brings 19 years of technology, education, and training expertise in IT. We also have with us Miss Sridevi Murugan ma'am, who has had 17 years of IT experience and is a passionate developer and problem solver. And Dr. Bindu Narayan, who is a data sciences professional with 20 plus years of experience. We have Dr. Surendra Kaushik, who is an innovation director at Volvo Group India and vice president of IEEE Technology and Engineering Management Society. And our very own Dr. Jasdeep Kaur Dhanua, who is currently serving as the executive member for WIBD India chapter. As professor in the Government Women Technical University of NCT of Delhi, training and placement officer, experience of head of the department, PI of government projects. She brings 20 years of technology management experience from academia. And Meenakshi Arun ma'am, who has 18 plus years of experience in software development, education, and analytics. She's currently serving as the Director of Data and Analytics at Microsoft India.
Now, talking about the Women in Big Data India programs. So Women in Big Data India chapter is running 5 programs, namely Vidya, Saraswati, Shakti, Gayatri, and Lakshmi. Now talking about each of these programs. So Vidya aims to bridge the divide between industry and academia by holding regular events with leaders from industry, government, and educational institutions. Saraswati is an industry-driven curriculum and certificate program for design and development. Shakti has programs that targets women who are aiming to restart their career or education. The Gayatri program partners with industry association and corporates for development and execution of programs in developing women leaders. And the Lakshmi pillar provides job fairs for employers to provide internships and full-time employment opportunities to women. Now introducing our speaker for the day, Mr. Apurva Pandey. Apurva Pandey is the founder and CEO of Brownloop, a company with the world's most advanced and comprehensive spend analytics and insight system for private equity and holding companies. He is a technology leader and has over 16 years of experience in leading business programs and technology thought leadership in the areas of data analytics, cloud adoption, hyperautomation, enterprise integration, machine learning, and business process management. His work experience includes the director of data analytics and artificial intelligence, the head of products and innovation, and the principal of value engineering group at Inter Technologies. He has built a couple of SaaS products over the years. He has also worked as the technical lead at Infosys Technologies. He has currently joined us from the EST time zone to introduce us to the concept of private equity and the role of data analytics in this field. We would like to welcome you, sir, to talk to us about this field, and we would like to know your insights about all of this. So,
Thank you, Anubhuti and Priyanshi. It was a good introduction. The first time I'm hearing about big data and women in big data, so it was very insightful. All right, so we start the session on data analytics in private equity. Let me share my screen here and just confirm that you are all able to see the screen.
yes, sir, your screen is visible.
Great. All right, so welcome everybody and good evening. So we start with a session around data analytics and private equity. And what we'll essentially do and cover is we will look at the overview of private equity space and what private equity means. I realize that we have mostly young people joining, so we thought that it might help to just give an overview of what private equity is before we deep dive into where the data analytics opportunities are, so that you can all appreciate it as we go ahead, right? And I also have access to the chat window here. So if there are any questions as we're going through the sessions, please feel free to sort of answer them. We will have a small Q&A session in the end, but happy to sort of answer as we go ahead as well. Right? So just a little bit about me. I think Anubhuti did a better job in talking about me than I do. So I have a lot of experience in data analytics and enterprise architecture. This is what I've been doing, built a couple of products. I'm also a business process management coach. So working with companies, advising them how to restructure business processes to get more value, increase revenue, lower costs. Recently, I started a company, Brown Loop, focusing on private equity analytics. And as a part-time hobby, I'm also a mountain biker. I am a pilot. So the small little plane that you see is the one that I fly. And I have a family of 3, my wife and an 8-year-old daughter. Stay in New Jersey, US. All right, so from an agenda perspective, moving on, so we'll have a quick introduction to private equity. As I said, we look at how value is created in private equity, and then move on to how data analytics can and is helping private equity generate value for their investments. And then we'll also look at some use cases and key trends around where are these opportunities and how data analytics is being used in private equity, right? And then we'll open for Q&A. Cool. So to start with, what is private equity, right? So private equity, as per the definition that you see here, is an investment firm, right? Which means it is basically a firm that puts in money into an entity with a hope to get further returns or more returns at a later point in time, right? So essentially, what does private equity invest in? It invests in companies, right? So essentially what it does, it finds certain companies that has growth potential and puts in money into that company, operates the company for some time in some cases, and then sells the company out for a later time for getting some profit, right? Now, you might have heard about other forms of investments as well, right? Like as you see here in the slide, there are seed funds, there are angel investors, there's venture capital, and there's private equity, right? So some of this you might have heard in your past life in terms of what venture capital is and what angel investing is, but just to touch upon the differences and similarities. So all of these forms of investments, basically all of these kinds of companies are firms that invest in different companies, right? When you go and say, if you're a startup founder and you want to start up your own company, you might need money, initial capital to grow and hire people and build products. So you might reach out to people who are called angel investors, right? They are people who have money and they would trust in you, believe in you, and give you money so that you can grow. And in return, what you would give is a portion of your company so that as you grow ahead, they get the profit back around the investments that they have made. And then we have venture capital as well, and private equity is in the same space. The difference between all these three is the stage at which these investments are made. So venture capital and angel investors are done. Angel investing is done at a smaller stage when the company is just starting or forming. Private equity typically invests in larger companies, companies that have well-formed operations. They're multi-million-dollar companies, and like $100 million company, which would get an investment from a private equity company, in a view that they would become $1 billion or $2 billion or $10 billion company, right? So essentially, this is the whole process. So the firm that goes and invests money is called the private equity, right? Any questions as I move ahead? Please feel free to type it on the chat window. Right. So let's look at the private equity life cycle, and I touched upon this briefly, right? So private equity companies, they have essentially 4 stages, right? They go and find companies that they find that are growth potential, they can invest in. Then once they have found and identified the company, they go and purchase it, right? Which means they put in money, either they buy it full out, which means the entire part of the company, or they buy a portion of the company, right? 50%, 60%, 100%, depending on how much control do they want on the buyout. Then once they have bought the company, they hold it for a period about 7 to 10 years, right? So within 7 to 10 years, the idea or the objective is for the private equity to make that company grow, right? Significantly, right? So if they've bought it for say 10 million, they would want it to grow to $100 million, right? And then eventually at the end of 7 to 10 years, they would go and sell it off. So essentially they would have made a profit of $90 million on that particular purchase, right? So in private equity typically operates in all industries. So they go and buy retail companies, they go and buy pharma companies, automobile companies, manufacturing companies. So it's a very unique sort of structure, which is basically industry agnostic, yet has to cover all the industries. So people who work in private equity or manage these companies typically have an understanding of a broader market set. And they are able to then manage the buyouts, the sellouts, and the growth plan, right? So that's the high level sort of overview and a life cycle about how a private equity company works, right? Now, what you will realize is that analytics, and as we talk ahead, is analytics forms a very key part in all of these phases, right? And we will talk about each one of them, of how data analytics is driving the target screening, which is how do you go and find companies that have potential? How do you go and buy them? What do you see when you buy them? How do you create values? And how do you basically get them ready for exit, right? Let's look at the P fund structure again, and I'm going purposefully a little deep into the private equity space so that everybody gets the idea and understands the private equity before we move to data analytics. So what happens is, and let me see if I can turn on the pointer here, right? So first of all, there is a sponsor which basically creates the private equity fund, right? And they consist of a management team and general partners, right? So GPs are general partners. So this is basically the private equity management team. And what they do is they go out to investors, people who have a lot of money, and say, we are creating a private equity fund in which we would want you to put in money, right? So essentially what they do is they create a fund where a lot of investors put in money, and these investors are called limited partners. And essentially the private equity team, the management team, tells investors that we are going to invest this money into other companies and give you return back, right? So the investors as such have very limited role to play. They don't have an active role in the process of investments and value creation and sellouts. It is the private equity management team that does all the managing of the fund and so on and so forth, right? And in return, what they get is management fees, plus they get a part of the profit, right? So if the fund is a $100 million fund and they go and invest in companies and sell out for 200 million, they would get a portion of that profit as a as a as a return, and investors get also the rest of the return, right? And essentially the funds then go and invest in companies, and then they manage it and grow it, right? Is this clear? Any questions till now? Right. Cool. Now, looking at some of the private equity companies globally, we have one of the largest companies is the Blackstone Group. We have Carlyle, we have KKR, we have Advent. So these are some of the largest global companies. Most of them come from either the US or the European regions. Now we are seeing increased growth in the Asian market as well. And these are like, for example, Blackstone Group, which you see here, they have about 400 companies that they manage, right? So they have bought 400 companies that they manage on a daily basis, and then eventually will sell them out or take them public to make the profit, right? And private equity, the name private equity, again, I just want to highlight is why is it called private equity? Because they essentially buy companies which are not listed in the stock market, right? Like if you and I have to go and invest in a company, we go and buy the stocks in the stock market. So that's basically public equity. So it's a public market. But for private companies who are not on the stock market, the private equity route is a way to invest in them. Some of the players in the Indian market, one of the largest is Kotak Private. We have Motilal Oswal. We have ICICI Funds. There are others as well, and we are seeing increasing sort of activity in the Indian market as well, with private equity getting more and more prominent and investing in deals. All right, now how does private equity create value? And this is again leading into the data analytics topic, is what does private equity do to make sure that the company grows from, say, $100 million company to a $200 million company, right? So they have various strategies, right? And some of these are also changing as we move ahead in the future because of the dynamics of what has happened in the last 5 years, 10 years. COVID is also playing a big impact in some of these, right? So basically what they do is they go and buy and build, which is basically restructure the company. They have people and talent investments. So if they see that the company that they have bought out requires a management overhaul or a team overhaul, they would go and do that. They also lead tech investments and digital transformation. The private equity companies would advise and consult and drive the digital transformation in these companies. Digital transformation is becoming a very, very powerful tool these days to increase the value of a company, right? Like if a company has everything automated and they have very minimal manual inputs, the costs are obviously low, and there is a lot of demand for that company in the market for people looking to invest and buy the company. The private equity companies also help in geographical expansion. So if they buy a company in India, they would want to open an office in US or Europe or Australia. So they help in the expansion of these companies, right? Similarly, operational effectiveness, pricing strategy, ESG is a big topic right now. So there are certain levers that they use. And again, data analytics is playing a key role in all of this, right? Like, for example, if you have to improve the sales force effectiveness of a company, you would need tools that can analyze the current effectiveness. Where do you want to go? What are the gaps? What are the process gaps? Where the opportunities are? And there's so much data available, right? Using data science, machine learning, building data platforms, BI dashboards. All of this is a part of all the items that you see here. Even pricing strategy. How do we price? What should be the price in India versus US versus some other country? Should we decrease the price? Should we increase the price? Should we offer promotions? All of that is now driven by analytics. And private equity, as I said, it spans all industries in general. So they have to, and there is no other way for them to manage it at such a scale without using tools and automation and analytics. Again, building on the point, there is advanced analytics is one of the key powerful levers. Some of the examples of what these companies do is, For example, private equity, since they have a fund that they use to invest in the companies, they have to know the fund performance, right? How is my portfolio companies doing? Are they going down? Are they going up? Because ultimately they have to respond or reply or answer to the investors of where their money is right now, right? So what's the internal rate of return? What's the how much money are they getting? Are they when are they going to break out, and so on and so forth, right? ESG scorecard, which is environmental, social, and governance, right, is one of the key topics. So right, you might have heard of companies going carbon neutral, or having social sort of structures, which is women empowerment, women in leadership, also governance kind of structures. So private equity companies are becoming more and more particular in investing in companies that have a very good or defined ESG agenda. If a company is creating a lot of environmental waste, or if it's not carbon neutral, there are companies which are shying away from buying them, right? So, or if they don't have a proper mix in the enterprise in terms of gender neutrality or proper governance, I think a lot of companies are shying away from buying them. So, how does the company rate in terms of the ESG scorecard is a big analytical topic. People analytics, geospatial, supply chain, and we'll talk about the supply chain topic here in a little bit as well. Cross portfolio monitoring is a big topic because they have so many companies that they've bought, like Blackstone, as I said, they have 400 companies. Now they have to monitor the performance of each of these 400 companies. How are these companies doing from a financial perspective? How are their balance sheets looking? How are their operational parameters looking? So just imagine doing that for 400 companies. Even one company is typically normally challenging, but as you start to manage 400 companies and monitor them on a day-to-day basis, imagine the kind of automation that is required to get to that particular piece, right? Now, having said all this is great, but what you would realize when you actually go to private equity is 99% of the work is done in Excel sheets, right? It's still very, very underserved in terms of technology, right? There is huge volume and velocity of data that is coming in from all of these sources, but 90% of the work is still done in Excel sheets. Right, so there is very limited sort of penetration that has happened from a advanced analytics, machine learning, data science standpoint. While everybody realizes that the importance of these tools, the tools that are currently being used is mostly Excel, right? And this is a huge opportunity for people in the data science community, people in the analytical community, to build tools that can serve the private equity market, right? Even a simple improvement in the whole process about for a decision making of what to buy, when to buy, what to sell, when to sell, can lead to a huge improvement in the value, right? And essentially what private equity companies are looking for is value, right? Because they have investments and they have made investments and they want that return back, right? So just to sort of level set and get a current picture around where the status is around these companies, Excel is still the king. There's huge opportunity for advanced analytics and machine learning to drive the changes. Right. Now, let's look at a couple of use cases around where the opportunities are and how's data science and advanced analytics being used in the private equity space, right? So we looked at the four value chain, the life cycle stages, right? Finding companies, buying companies, creating value, and then selling them off, right? So let's look at the first one, which is finding companies. Now, how do private equity companies decide what to buy, right? They have to go and find the companies, which is basically look at potential targets. What geography should they invest in? Which companies are driving change? So imagine the entire world and all the companies that are operating, right? And a private equity team that is going to then decide what to buy, right? So there's so much information available now. How do we screen those 10 companies that are good potential, right? Is a big data science problem, right? there is so many external, internal parameters that needs to get taken care of, and especially looking at private companies which have limited data in the public domain, right? Like if you look at Coca-Cola or some of these public companies, they have all their financial statements available in the public domain, right? Since they're traded on the stock market. But if you look at a smaller company, which is not yet public, it's the information sourcing itself is so difficult, right? So there are a lot of tools that have developed in the market. Some of them are Indian companies like Traction, there's Crunchbase, there is Dealflow, there is PitchBook. What these tools do is basically they develop models and a database about all the companies and how they are performing on a day-to-day basis, and which will be fed to the private equity company as an input, saying these are the 10 companies that have high potential for growth, right? These are the companies that are driving change. So the use of data science, advanced analytics for finding companies is being seen, and there is most of the work is done on the site, which is basically what to buy. This is one example around a very interesting example that I saw while researching on private equity was, if you look at this is a company that was looking at basically expanding on a certain region in the US. This is the California Bay Area region, right? And one of the analysts or the young analysts in the company was given a task to find where are the high net worth individuals living in California, right? So what he essentially did, and I was working with him as well, was he went to Google Maps, right? He didn't have any tools, right? He was just young out of college, and he went to Google Maps, and he searched for two terms. He searched for Walmart and he searched for Trader Joe's, right? So Walmart and Trader Joe's are two grocery companies in the US. Trader Joe's has organic stuff. It is high value organic stuff, and Walmart is a large big bazaar style format, right? So just by searching Trader Joe's and Walmart, you could see a trend emerging, right? Like, which is basically all the Trader Joe's are on the west side of the bay, all the Walmarts are on the east side of the bay, right? And what does it tell? What does it tell from a demographic representation standpoint, right? And where these high net individuals are living, right? So it essentially says that people who are buying organic stuff are the ones who might have more money, right? Because they're expensive, right? And people who are going to Walmart, they might want value, right? Which is low cost value, right? So just by a simple search on Google Maps like this can help make decisions. So the idea that I was getting to was that sometimes you don't need too complex a data science model to be built. It could be just simple searches and using the information that is available to sort of make quick decisions, right? And private equity is all about making quick decisions. If you find a company, you have to buy it in 1 week, right? And in 1 week, how do you get to know more about it, right? So the team, if some of you go and join a private equity company as a key analyst there, right? You would be basically required to make decisions and help the private equity management team make these decisions on a day-to-day basis, right? And you will have information that is available to you across the world, and how to use everything to sort of drive the insights that we're looking at, right? So the message was complex is not always good. Simple is good sometimes as well, right? Now, once you have found a company that you would want to buy, what do you look at when you have to buy it, right? So you have to look at where the company stands right now. What is the current performance? What is the growth potential of the company? Are there any problems that you've detected in the company in terms of financials or people issues or culture, or any lawsuits that might help or affect the value creation in the future, right? So there is this whole set of dashboards and analytics that is done during the due diligence process itself, right? So during this time where the company that is being bought out sends the information around their performance. So in 2 or 3 days, the private equity companies have to make a decision whether to buy it or not, right? And there are like n number of questions that they have to answer, right? So essentially, all of this is again done on Excel. There are companies like Blue Origin that you see here. They have made extensive tools to sort of help in due diligence process as we move ahead, right? ESG. Now, ESG I touched upon briefly is also a very, very important topic these days that is driven by analytics, right? It deals with everything environmental, social, and governance, right? Which is, what is your climate change strategy? What is the freedom that is given to employees in the company? What are the human rights sort of related aspects that have been put in the company? What is the business ethics, board independence, and so on and so forth, right? Now, while these are all very important topics, you would realize that finding data and using analytics to sort of come out with a score is extremely, extremely difficult in this, right? Because how would you measure whether a company gives equal rights to all employees, right? Whether employees have the freedom to talk in the company, right? How is the politics that is going on in a particular company? Is the top management appreciating growth or not, right? So any ideas how companies are measuring this? If you have any ideas, just write it on the chat window. Or how would you, for example, understand whether employees are happy in a company? What are the different ways that you can use data, and which data points would you track to find out the overall happiness of an employee? Any ideas?
Or do we by any chance perform a sentiment analysis also in context to the points that we're trying to get the answers for?
Right, yeah, sentiment analysis, somebody said feedback system. So these are basically asking for feedback and surveys, right? But if you look at more and more companies are also doing it more without asking, right? Like without asking, how would you basically know what's the sentiment of the company? So there are a lot of analytics that is done on emails these days around what people are talking, how people are sharing, what kind of words is being used in the chat windows, how is the team calls going, right? So there is huge analytics around that as well, right? From a waste management perspective, how much waste is the company generating? What is the carbon footprint? These are becoming very, very important. And some of these are very complex, but yet very important. So again, coming to the point that these are all in a very nascent state right now, right? People have understood the importance of it, but there are new ways emerging to find problems. And as I said, it doesn't depend on how much experience you have in analytics, right? It depends on whether or not are you able to come out with a new idea of doing something and solving a problem in a simple form, rather than applying too much complex analysis and models into it, right? So it's all about creativity now. It's all about common sense in some sense, right? So people who can think broad, people who are like basically have a knack of going into the depths of the problem would be able to then succeed. And this is what the world needs from data analytics and data science and data scientists right now, right? So one advice which I typically give to young folks who are just starting is don't get bogged down by what has happened. The world is always restarting every month, right? On every year in analytics, like nobody has figured it out. So every year you would see a new tool coming in, a new concept coming in, a new way of working, and that's all a part of learning. So it's all there. The world is out there for you in terms of analytics right now. Moving on to private equity, which is the third state of creating value, right? So once they have bought the company, they have 10 years or 7 years to create value, right? Which is basically to grow the company. And then they apply certain pricing optimizations. As I said, they do geographic expansions. They They go for product platforms, digital transformation. They improve the supply chain, materials planning. So it goes into very industry specific domains right now, right? Which is if they have bought a insurance company, they would put in people or analysts who have huge insurance or industry experience, because then they will be able to drive all these changes at a very grassroots level, right? If they bought a high-tech company or a media company, like Disney, for example, goes and buys out a lot of companies. They have bought ESPN, they have bought Nat Geo, they have Disney themes, they have Disney parks, right? So when they buy ESPN, they need that particular set of brains who understand that that particular domain and the TV channel business and sports business to make sure that these changes are done, right? If they buy an aerospace company or airlines company, like Tata invested in Air India, right? They have bought Air India. Now they have to grow it. So how do they go and change, and what do they change in the management to make sure that the value is created? So again, not going into the depths of where analytics is used, I think it's a whole different topic around how industry uses analytics. And in some of these other sessions, like for example, the insurance, education, and the retail sessions that WIBD team is hosting, you would then know what these individual sort of parameters or levers are. But at a private equity level, everything gets collated at one level. Right. Now, moving on to one of the use cases that we are also working on in the private equity value creation space is how do you optimize cross-portfolio spend, right? Now, let's look at this particular problem in a little detail. So imagine that there is a private equity company like Blackstone or Carlyle, right? They have 400 companies that they have bought out or procured, right? Now, each of the company has its own operations, right? There is an airline company that has its own operation. There is a chemical company that has its own operations, and each of these companies are spending money, right? Like for example, if a company has Microsoft Office 365 as the way to sort of manage emails, right? The other portfolio company might also have Office 365 and so on and so forth, right? But the problem is that each of these companies are negotiating these deals with vendors separately, right? But at the private equity level, there is huge opportunity to have that scale and the negotiation power that these companies are not able to attain individually. So cross portfolio spend optimization becomes a big use case, and one of a very important use cases. Now the problem with this is that the private equity companies have limited visibility around where these companies are spending money, because each company has its own accounting system, has its own ERPs, has its own backend systems where the accounting is done, right? And sometimes what it happens is, most often what happens is each company would be storing the product names or the vendor names differently. Like for example, I might be calling it MS Corporation, but there could be other company that might be calling it Microsoft Corporation or just Microsoft, right? So these differences in the way the company names or the supplier names are stored makes it very difficult for private equity companies to combine the spends and look at it totality, right? So they spend basically a lot of time in manually collating and optimizing this, right? And you'll see some examples here, like from an actual report from a private equity company. So these are portfolio companies that share their spend data, and there'll be a bunch of analysts and data engineers working manually to sort of clean up the data. And eventually, what you see here is a report which has duplications, right? So MS Corp, MS USA, Microsoft Japan, Microsoft Corporation, Microsoft Canada, right? All these are not harmonized because the way that they are stored in these companies are different, right? The names are different. Airbus Defense, Airbus Helicopters, all of these are same companies. So essentially, the private equity company is not able to get a full view of where the money is getting spent, right? And this is where the opportunity for data cleaning, data science comes in, right? And we are also working, a lot of companies are working on something called as entity resolution, right? Which entity resolution is a data science problem, which is basically combining two entities that are similar, right? For example, if there's a person, John Paul, and there's another person, JP, they could be the same person. But how does the model know that these are the two same people? Similarly, for Microsoft and Microsoft Corporation and MS Corp, or Amazon could be AMZN, right? So how would you know that these companies are together? So there is this whole machine learning sort of approach, or in general data cleaning approach called entity resolution, and now it is driven by something called as active learning and machine learning. There are a lot of tools available that we are also using: Zing, Dedupe, IO, and Python-based Dedupe tools. Zing I brought because Zing is an open source tool which is basically built by somebody called Sonal Goyal, and she's a part of the WIBD team. Right, so one of your team members basically has developed this tool, and it's great, and we use it, right? So you can go and check out Zing and look at entity resolution using Zing, and she's also, I think, speaking in a conference in the next I think couple of weeks around just for this particular topic of how do you basically use data science and algorithms and active learning to make sure that these records are combined. And if we're able to combine these two records, there's huge opportunities, right? We're able to basically drive cost-saving opportunities, better target customers, because we know that John Paul and JP are the same customers and they're buying in different stores. So now we'll be able to get and marry them together in the database to get a full picture, a 360 review of what's happening with that particular person or entity. So and this is one of the biggest challenges in private equity as well right now. How do you get clean data? How do you harmonize data together with so many different companies operating in different forms to bring everything together, right? And there is this 1 in 10, 100 rule, is that if you are able to fix the problem at the source, you spend $1. If you're able to fix it, cleanse it, then you're able to basically it costs $10. But if you're not able to do it, the cost is huge, right? So essentially for private equity companies, again, this becomes a very, very important topic. And I encourage all of you to just go and look about this as well as you're getting into the data cleanup, machine learning space. This is not just used in private equity, but all the other industries are also struggling with the same problem around reference data cleanup, master data cleanup, right? And very basic problems yet not solved. Right, moving on. So I'll just try to summarize here before we open for questions is as we saw that private equity and data analytics is expected to play a very, very vital role in private equity across the deal life cycle, right? Right from finding the right companies to deal execution, to target screening, to post deal, and then the actual digital transformation, right? And the flavors and the answers and the value that analytics can bring in across these cycles are very, very important. And each of these sort of phases has its own sort of key characteristics around what tools can be used and how fast it has to be done, right? So it's all about now using the data that is available. Data is available with high velocity, high veracity right now, but how do you effectively make use of those and go beyond using Excel sheets, which works well, which is a very broad tool, but then these specific problems need specific solutions as well, right? And the use of data science, machine learning is continuing to play a very, very important role in private equity. Yep, I think that was all about the session today. Just wanted to keep it at a high level, make sure that you all understand private equity, and if anybody is interested in going deep into it, happy to connect with me separately as well. I'm on LinkedIn, so we can chat about it in more detail as well as we go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very informative and insightful session. I would now like to open the chat box on the platform for questions. So you can write in the chat box, or you could unmute yourself if you want to ask any questions.
So my first question, and this is Soumya here, my first question is, how many of the folks here are going to get into private equity after this session?
I will try my level best.
You
I am definitely intrigued by this field.
definitely.
So
So I
Yeah,
think
it's all about money. If you're interested in money, there's a lot of money in the space, and you have to deal with money. Basically,
Yeah.
it's all about numbers and dollars and everything else, right? So if money excites you, I think this is a good space. And one of the advantages of this industry is it's very broad. So you get to know about insurance, you get to know about aerospace, you get to know about chemicals, because these are the companies that you would eventually be dealing with on a day-to-day basis, right? So it's very broad, it's very interesting. Some people like find it very dry as well sometimes, because there's just too much Excel sheets and numbers going on, and they need tangible sort of things to hold on to. But yeah, if finance is something that interests you, I think this would be a good direction to look at.
So I have a few questions.
Right.
They're very general, but I'll just ask them anyway. So whenever we're reading about private equity, it usually comes along with investment banking, right? We always hear it's investment banking and private equity. And as you mentioned, automation in the private equity industry has just started coming. Still a majority of the work's being done on Excel. But when we look at the counterparts, investment banks, they've been automating for a while now. So why do you think there's this gap or this delay in them adopting for automation a little later than their, you know, like for in comparison to investment banks?
Yeah. So investment banks deal with a lot of other aspects as well. So what are investment banks, right? Investment banks are basically parties which help get these deals done, right? So there is a company that is getting that the private equity company is buying, and then there's a target company. The investment banks are the ones that make the deal happen. They are like Shadi.com, right? For finance industry. So they arrange for all the terms and conditions. They drive the investment thesis. They build the investment plan for the private equity company, and make sure that the deal happens in the right form, right? So there is also essentially, there is a lot of investments going on, right? In private equity also, I would say the larger companies have invested a lot of money, right? But there are smaller segments of private equity companies which are under tap right now. Investment banks are typically the big people, right? The big fours, the Goldman Sachs, the Morgan Stanleys, and these are the world, right? So they are essentially like huge companies, and they have huge investment power, right? There's not too many investment banks you would see as you would see private equity companies. There are about 15,000 private equity companies in the world, but not 15,000 investment banks, right? There's a limited set of investment banks that are there. So just by the sheer scale of what they do, they're able to invest more. Having said that, there is a lot of space in investment banking and scope of investment banking as well. Like I've been also talking to investment bankers, and their time also goes in Excel sheets, right? So what you hear and what you see coming outside versus what actually happens, there is a difference, right? And a lot of these companies are and also, as I said, like data analytics is evolving. Like machine learning was not there 5 years back, right? So while investment banks have incorporated statistical analysis, advanced analytics, but as soon as machine learning comes, they have to redo the things, right? They have to relook at how optimizations can be done. So there's constant work in these industries. While on the outside, certain industries might look like more ahead in the curve versus the others, but I don't think so. There is too much difference between where investment banks are and where private equity is. The nature of the work is a little different. So as I said, they're the market makers, and they're the deal makers sitting in the middle.
So I have another question. So when we were talking about the social aspect of ESG and how we want to measure it, you said that it's picked up from the way people talk on chats and their calls and those things. So these days we read a lot about data privacy and how it will be, a big thing that everybody wants to fight against and protect their data. So isn't that a little invasive when we're trying to understand the social aspect by listening to
Right.
these calls?
Right, and that's why it is still an open topic. People don't know how to measure that, right? They have been thinking about these ideas about analyzing emails and sentiment analysis and all that, but not too many companies have implemented it. Primarily because the reason that you tell, right, which is privacy. There is very careful thought given to privacy these days, and even privacy is a part of ESG agenda, right? So if you're breaking privacy, you're actually not meeting the ESG agenda, right?
Exactly.
So it's a little counterintuitive that but you still have to find out and measure how a company is doing in terms of gender diversity or the social responsibilities, or outside, both internal and external responsibilities around the company, environmental aspects of it, governance aspects of it. So it's not solved, right? And people have not yet figured out how to solve that. So, and that is where the opportunities are. There is a need, but we don't have a solution right now. There have been attempts to put together a scorecard and do some analytics around it, but is it effective? Yeah, maybe better than what they had, but is it the end? No, definitely not.
Sir, I received a few questions in the chat box where people are asking that how should students get into this field? And specifically, they've asked if you could suggest some tutorials or books or affordable courses to get into this field, like for data analysis and private equity or finance.
Right. So the first thing is to start reading about the space in general, like not just private equity, but investment banks, hedge funds, venture capitals. I think all of this form an ecosystem on their own, right? Also, when you start investing in the stock market, typically you tend to start off read about the company, right? Like if I invest in, say, a company in India right now, right? I would want to know more about it. I look at the financial statements. I look at what the company is doing, where the news is coming from. Is it positive? Is it negative? Right? So that's typically the way everybody does it, which is basically just know more about the industry. And coming to the data analytics part of it, you would realize that it's not very unique in terms of what, or I wouldn't say this way. I would say it is basically an application of analytics in the actual industry sector itself. Like if you're buying a retail company, you would actually be doing retail analytics, which is where are my consumers coming from, where are the retention opportunities, what's the marketing campaigns, which campaigns are working, which campaigns are not working. So at that level, I think it becomes then industry specific. So what I would suggest is start to read about case studies around how different companies outside private equity as well has been using data analytics. What are the key case studies? And then apply it to the private equity space. If you're buying a company, then what would you do to grow it, right? So reading about the space, and then in general, I think understanding of where the world is going, what the trends are would help, right? And this is also one reason that the private equity hirings are typically very rigid and strict in terms of, because they want people who have a very broad understanding of the space, right? Either a very broad or a very deep. Like if they're buying say a pharma company, you should be like the pharma expert, right? But as people are starting new in their careers, they are never a pharma expert, but they can have a broad understanding of the market. So I would suggest that to start with getting a very broad understanding of how the market operates, how these financial companies operate, and then start to get into it. Right? There are a lot of internship opportunities in these private equity companies. There's technology companies that are working with private equity companies like us. Yeah, these are the ways.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm sure our participants who asked this question would have found this very useful and insightful. If there are any questions, I request the participants to send them right now in the chat box. Until then, I'll be sharing the feedback form, and I would request all the participants to fill that in. And if anyone would like to switch on their cameras, we could take a screenshot of all the participants along with sir.
Feel free to, if you're feeling shy to, ask the question, you can use the chat window, or you can even ask the question offline as well. We will redirect those questions to Apurva. Yeah.
Through the feedback form, we could definitely use those questions.
Yeah. Apurva, it was really insightful. Thank you. I It was quite a refresher for me to learn about the PE space. So thank you so much.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure there'll be quite a lot of people, asking for some internship opportunities and learning about this space in the near future once their course comes to an end.
Right. No. Yeah. Please feel free to reach out. Happy to support and happy to guide as we go ahead.
I have taken a screenshot right now, and I've also shared a few links to keep in touch with women in big data. So on behalf of all the participants, I would like to thank you, sir, for this insightful and informative session. I'm pretty sure everyone got to learn a lot about private equity, and at least I did, and so did Priyanshi. So it was really great for us. Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Apurva. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.